Hi there, and welcome to today's episode of A Different Way of Seeing, a podcast where we talk all things disability. I'm your host, Lois, and today we're talking about a topic that is very close to my heart because it's something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about. That is the question of recruitment and employment for persons with disabilities. And today we're talking with Karen Armour. And Karen is in the business of recruitment. And one of the reasons that I particularly wanted to chat to Karen on this topic is that in conversations with her, she and I have chatted about where the concept of hiring someone with a disability is both different from and similar to the realities of hiring someone without a disability. And I wanted to bring this conversation to my audience because I really feel that Karen has some points to make that are of incredible interest. So, Karen, having said all of that, thank you for coming on to A Different Way of Seeing to chat to us today. How are you doing?
Hi, Lois. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Well, it's great to have you with us, and I'm really fascinated to chat to you today and to just dive a little deeper into this concept of employment, recruitment, some of the things that you feel will make a difference, that may help people with disabilities to get a better chance at employment, and some of the things that perhaps you see as being problems that we may encounter. But before we go there, let's start by asking you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thank you, Lois. I am a SEMA qualified accountant by trade. I'm still busy with my SEMA qualification, with the last exam being in November this year. I left the corporate world in February 2025, and I left because I had a complete meltdown and mental breakdown, and I was subsequently diagnosed with a disorder called borderline personality disorder, which made it incredibly difficult for me to function and for me to be in the corporate world, which is toxic and extremely busy and it's a difficult environment to be in. I then went into the recruitment business in April 2025. So I've been in recruitment for a good 4 or 5 months. And I've been working with diverse candidates, and I've got a passion for working with disabled candidates as well, because I do believe that they have a lot to offer. And that's why I agreed to interviewing with you this morning.
It's one of those things that I think within the recruitment space, it's often hard for people with disabilities to find someone in the recruitment business who is willing to acknowledge their value and their worth. So, just on that topic itself, thank you so much for being open-minded and through your own lived experience. I think that that's part of it. But it is so important because so often we find that you approach a recruiter and they go, sorry, can't help you. So it is part of the reasons that I think it's important to have this conversation because of your experiences as well. So we know that globally it's hard for people with disabilities to gain employment. Why do you feel this is the case from your perspective as being in the recruitment business?
Thank you, Lois. Well, people with disabilities, there's this persistent stigma and misconception about the ability and productivity. And people seem to lack the awareness or education um, amongst the employers on the reasonable accommodation of people with disabilities. They have this misconception of workplace infrastructure and the challenges that come with accessibility for people with disabilities. Um, as a recruiter, sometimes we overlook these candidates due to an unconscious bias, and this is the employer as well. They lack the training and they have this unconscious bias that someone with a disability cannot perform like someone who is able bodied. I just want to mention in terms of my experiences, my personal experiences, someone with mental illness, there's the same stigma involved with mental illness. And I'm very much aware of the stigma against me suffering from mental illness, having lived through the experience as well with my previous employer. So it's a very real stigma, and it's something that people with disabilities have to negotiate and navigate in order to get employment.
You know, I it's something that I really struggle to think through because we are living in an age where we are seeing so much work being done around diversity, equity, inclusion. There's so much advocacy work being done around disability and inclusion, and particularly recently in the space, perhaps not so much of mental illness, but certainly with other cognitive conditions like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. And we're seeing all this training going on. Why are we not seeing a shift in the day-to-day experience of people living with conditions experiencing employment? I just cannot understand what the gap is there. Is it that people think they've done the training on diversity and inclusion, so the tick box is done, that means that everything's in place, where the stigma is actually not shifting at all? I have you any thoughts on that?
I do, Lois. Yes, thank you. It is definitely a case of, for many employers, it's a tick box exercise where they can say, we've done that, we've dealt with the diversity issue, and we can move on. As I mentioned previously, in a lot of instances, people have this unconscious bias
Mm,
because they don't see and they don't feel the fact that someone with a disability is just as capable
yeah.
of doing a job as someone who is able bodied and can run the comrades or something like that. So there is a definite unconscious bias there, and it's something I've experienced having mentioned that I had mental illness, even though the employer was very vocal about mental illness awareness,
Mm.
the unconscious bias showed them that they weren't as comfortable with someone with mental illness as they should have been. And it's the same with disabilities. It's the same experience, it's the same problem that people with disabilities have. It's more about unconscious bias than it is about any education or advocacy for it.
So it's a bigger problem than than just ticking the boxes, putting the policies in place, but not actually living up to that on the real world experience.
Correct.
So, okay. I don't think we're going to find a simple solution to that. But I think there's still a lot of value in the conversations that you and I have had that in talking, you've raised a number of pointers that I thought were really interesting and I wanted to share with my audience. And I was very excited when you agreed to come and talk about some of them. And I want to take it back one step and say, taking everything that we've discussed so far into consideration, why do you feel it is important for a job seeker to work with someone in the recruitment space?
It is extremely important because recruiters act as the bridge between the job seeker and the employer. So if a disabled candidate comes to me and I speak to them and I um, take them on as a candidate, I can advocate for the candidates. I can highlight what their strengths are and what their limitations are. And I can really go to an employer and say, look past the disability and look at what this candidate can do for you. And it's all about me acting as the bridge and the recruiter acting as the bridge.
So then going back to what we said earlier about the fact that some recruiters overlook the value of people with disabilities because of their own personal stigma or their own personal unconscious bias. How would you suggest that a job seeker with a disability actually find a recruiter who would be willing to advocate on their behalf for the access, who would talk to them and understand enough about, what their access needs actually are, what their limitations may be, and what their value may be? How can they find someone who can accurately represent and advocate for them, particularly as a person with a disability?
Thank you, Lois. Yes, candidates with disabilities would need to research agencies that specialize in inclusive hiring or that have disability employment programs. And there are those around that do have that speciality. My agency is very interested in helping people with disabilities should they meet the criteria for those positions. The other thing is to network with disability advocacy organizations, and they can also connect job seekers to supportive recruiters such as myself, because a lot of the work has already been done in bridging that and finding recruiters that would advocate for them.
So you're saying that what I'm hearing, and I may be mishearing this, I may be filtering this through some of my own preconceptions here. Um, you're almost saying, I think, that a job seeker, in a sense, needs to, first of all, interview the recruiter to see if they will represent the needs of that particular job seeker with a disability.
Correct. And I just want to highlight in any interview situation, even with companies, it's not one-sided. An interview is about the company seeing whether the candidate is suitable, as well as the candidate interviewing the company. And it works with the recruiters as well. You cannot work with someone who you cannot work with.
Yeah.
There, there are a lot of recruiters that I myself won't work with because of certain predispositions or certain judgments that they've made on myself when I was looking for positions previously. So it's all about who you can work with. Um, so you are interviewing the recruiter and they are interviewing you in the same token.
Okay. That's a very useful step because I think often people just go to a recruiter and say, help, find me a job. And that important step of communication, of understanding exactly what the person is able to do, the tools they may need to do the job, and how best to represent that, that needs to be communicated. So there's a degree there of the job seeker needing to advocate for themselves first and foremost with a recruiter, but the right recruiter who is willing to then take that advocacy forward into any of the positions that they look for.
Correct.
At the same time, and this is, I know this is something on which you're very passionate about talking about, the important role of the CV, the curriculum vitae. So, why is a CV important? How is it used to help a job seeker, a recruiter, and to help find a placement?
A CV talks for you when you're not there to talk for yourself. So it's a very vital first impression. And it acts as a marketing tool for you. So I'm extremely passionate about a CV because of the number of CVs I go through every single day. And it tells me about your story. It tells me what you've done, who you are, and what you can bring to the employments that you're seeking. Um, we often use a CV to shortlist candidates, and without a strong CV, many candidates are overlooked before they they even get an interview. I just want to take a step back and a moment to illustrate my point.
Mhm.
So I have been looking for a human resources officer for a certain company. And I got over 600
Oh my word.
applications.
Yeah.
Okay. And in 2 days, I had to go through 600 CVs in order to be able to highlight and bring through 3 or 4 candidates that I could present to my clients. And someone who has not done a professional CV and one that attracts my attention immediately um, will fail because I have to go through it so quickly. So, in order to make the CV professional, it would I would say put it through an AI tool in order to summarize it. We don't want to read through 6 or 10 pages of what you've done in order to see it. We need to see a summary, an introduction. What a quick 3 or 4 line or 2 paragraph summary of what you've done and what you can bring to the table in terms of employment. Then summarize your experience where you've worked. Don't write long paragraphs and long stories because that is very difficult for a recruiter to read when they're having to go through over 600 CVs in order to find exactly the right person. So it needs to be, the CV needs to be aesthetically pleasing, needs to look good, and there needs to be a summary so that we can quickly read through that to see if you are the right candidate or not. And I can't emphasize enough how important the summary is. I didn't realize until I started in the recruitment business how important a summary is in order to give the recruiter an idea of who you are.
One of the challenges that I've seen coming up on conversations around recruitment and around CVs is often that people think that all they need to do is to send in the transcripts of their qualifications. Is that a problem that you experience on a regular basis?
Absolutely. And it's one of my pet hates when someone just sends me a transcript, because that tells me nothing about who you are, what your personality is. And in fact, um, it's quite funny. And I think we've had this discussion before where I immediately reject that because that doesn't tell me anything about the person. And I often walk down the passage after this going, matter, 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 you know, and it's quite difficult for me to actually gauge who this person is and whether they will be able to fill that position, because it's not just on academic transcripts, it's also about experience and who you are.
And I think it's also there's a degree there around the culture because I think increasingly companies are aware that they are needing to find people who will fit into the culture of the organization. And you can't tell anything about the type of person just from the academic record or even
Correct.
just a list of previous jobs held.
Absolutely, that is incredibly important, and it's something that I look for. And and as a recruiter, a little bit of background information in order to enlighten you on how we go about the recruitment process. So when a client first comes to us and asks us to recruit for a certain position, we sit down with that client and have an interview or a meeting, and we ask them all the questions about what sort of person would fit into this role, whether it be male, female, black, white, colored, Indian, all those different questions, because it is important to understand exactly what sort of person would fit into that role. We also question about the previous incumbents, and why they left, what sort of person they were. If they've been in the company for a long period, we're very interested about the sort of person that person is, so that we can seek out and find a similar match to that sort of person. We also ask about the department that person is working in. What sort of people are in that department? What are they like? The person that the candidate is um, reporting to. What is their management style? How they like to be communicated with. This is all very important when we look for candidates. So we are looking for a match and a cultural fit into that organization, because besides all the qualifications and all that sort of thing, cultural fit is incredibly
Mm.
important, because someone who doesn't fit culturally is not going to survive in that company.
So, with that as an basis of understanding, then, if someone decides to approach you and send you their CV, what should they, how should they set up their CV in a way that will present them most favorably to both you as the recruiter and possibly to a company in which they may have a possibility of being placed? What would a dream
Okay.
CV look like to you? Not in terms of the specific detail of, but just in terms of how it's laid out, what kind of information you've already said, start with a summary, but give us a little bit of detail here about what people should do to help them lay out a more successful CV.
Okay, so for me, a more successful CV would include name, surname, contact details. Okay, that's important for the top and the
Right at the
beginning
start.
of the
Yeah.
CV. Okay, you don't have to put age, you don't have to put disability, you don't have to do all that stuff on the face of your CV. Okay, because disability doesn't dictate whether you can do that job. As a recruiter, we only interested in can you do that job or not. Okay, and if you can do the job that you're applying for, disability doesn't even enter into it with the CV. You keep it clear, you keep it structured, and you keep it easy to read. Okay, by that I'm saying the summary, as I said previously, is incredibly important because that's what catches you and that's what gets your attention. That's what gets my attention. So if I read somebody's summary and it tells me exactly what I need to know about that person, I go into the meat of the CV and I go through what they've done and their experience.
Okay, so what do you look for in that summary? What should be included in that summary?
Okay, so in the summary, you highlight your skills and you highlight your achievements, not just the duties that you've done. Okay, that comes further down in the body of the CV. Um, you also need to tailor your CVs to specific job applications. So it's not a one size fits all.
Mm.
So if you're applying, let's say, for example, you're applying for a financial manager position, uh, which is, my
Mm.
expertise, you tailor your summary according to the job that you're applying for. A financial manager position would be a different application to me applying for a financial accountant role or a management accountant role because they're different skills and they're different abilities in that. So um, it's important to tailor that summary to that.
And this is where you suggest looking at using an AI tool to help
Yes.
clarify that summary aspect.
Correct. And there have been great technological advancements with
Mm.
ChatGPT, Copilot, and all those, where you can add your. And what I do to get, when with a successful CV that's come through my vetting process, I dump it into ChatGPT to get a summary for whatever job I'm applying for the candidates,
Oh, interesting.
and
Hmm.
it tailors a summary and it tailors it specifically. And what I can do is I dump the CV in, I get a summary and I say, and if it's not exactly what I'm looking for, I then write, add that this person is willing to travel, or add that this person is
Mm.
willing to relocate, or so anything like that, that can actually add to a tailor-made CV. You can add and you can take away on ChatGPT, and you can tailor it to exactly what you're looking for in order to attract the eye of the recruiter or the company that you're applying to.
Mhm. Okay. Any other advice then on, so we're saying first page of the CV should include contact details and a summary that is tailored to the specific job that the person is applying for. But what if they're not actually applying for a specific job at that stage? If they are just approaching you as a recruiter, what would you like to see in that summary?
I would like to see what their skills and achievements are, not just their duties. I would like to see something clear, structured, and something that's easy to read. I don't want to go through pages and pages of a summary. I just want to see a short summary, 5 to 6 sentences of exactly who you are and what you've done.
Mhm.
Um, the body of the CV also needs to be concise, 2 to 3 pages maximum. We don't want to, after it's made it through the summary stage, we don't want to be wading through 6 pages, 7 pages, 8 pages. You can imagine if you've got 600 CVs to go
Yeah.
through, that it, the time constraint on going through 600 pages is huge. So 2 to 3 pages, just a brief summary of each position that you have previously done, even if you don't have experience, but maybe you have volunteered for something, that's important. Voluntary work shows your commitment. Even that, um, just a brief summary of each position, but no more than 2 to 3 pages total in your CV is adequate.
What about skills-based CVs? The skills of what you are capable of doing. Do you encounter those? Do you suggest that those are something that one could consider?
Yes, absolutely. So also on the CVs, you can, below the summary, you can put your key skills in. And that includes education. On a CV, having your qualifications on your CV is also vitally important. Some people put it below the summary, and some people put it right at the end. It doesn't matter which way around you do it. Um, as I said, the summary will include all of that, what you're qualified to do, if the summary is drafted correctly. But education, key skills, and if you put key skills, put it in bullet points. Put it, you say, I'll go back to the accounting thing, the accounting packages that you've worked on, whether it's
Mm.
SAP, Pastel, you list those under key skills, because sometimes an employer is specifically looking for a certain uh, computer package that you've worked
Yeah.
on, that you can, because they don't particularly want to go and train somebody to use Pastel, if that person has never used Pastel before. So that's also important. also under summary key skills. That can be a section as well on your CV.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Coming back to the topic of disability, and I there've so many conversations around the question of disclosure. So, when is the best time for a candidate, whether they're working through a recruiter or whether they're going directly to a company to search for skills? Because some people don't decide to go through a recruiter. But when should they disclose that they have a disability?
Okay, so
And
there's no
how?
there's no single right answer for this.
Mhm,
It depends on the comfort and of the individual, how confident they are with their disability, and how comfortable they are that they can sell their skills despite the disability.
mhm,
Some people choose to disclose upfront, especially if accommodations are needed. Others wait until being shortlisted. Um, but one of the highlights that I want to make, instead of disclosing it just because
mhm,
you want to disclose it, this disclosure should be framed positively and showing the capability, not focusing on the disability, but focusing on the capability of this individual. Um, I personally say it's not necessary on the CV stage. I would suggest, and that's just because of people's preconceived ideas of what a disability is. I would suggest in the first interview with the recruiter or with the person that you are speaking to disclose it then. So, say for example, someone with a disability has applied directly to the company, and they've applied and their CV is accepted, and they get that telephone call. Don't answer and say, oh, by the way, I'm Lois Strachan and I'm visually impaired.
mhm.
You frame it in the thing where you talk about what your abilities are, what you can do, and what you can bring for the company. And then towards the end of the conversation, if it's a telephone call, then you can say, oh, by the way, I am visually impaired, and this is what it means for me. And this is the accommodations that would need to be made for me. So it's all about framing it in a positive light, focusing on what you're able to do and what accommodations need to be made.
Would your answer be different if the position that's being advertised is specifically asking for people with disabilities to apply?
If if the company is asking for a disabled employee, because remember that South Africa in particular offers tax incentives if a company does employ somebody with a disability. So yes, absolutely. If that is a requirement for that position, disclose it upfront, and because then they're specifically looking for someone for a disability in order to tick that box and find somebody for that tax incentive.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. It's a complex conversation, I know, because
Absolutely.
each individual situation may be different. There's no single solution to approaching the whole recruitment side and the employment space. What advice would you give to someone who is called for an interview? What would you suggest there in terms of how they present themselves, their skills, their abilities, and perhaps their accommodation needs?
Thank you, Lois. All right, so first and foremost, the most important thing to do, and this is for every candidate, whether they are disabled or able bodied, is to research the company and research the role before stepping into that interview situation.
Mhm.
Um, go onto their website, go and see what they do and what they're all about, and what their belief systems, what their ethos is. Um, Most commonly, their mission statement and their vision statement. Those are all on their websites. So that will give you an idea of the culture and what this company believes in. And you can identify from the website whether this is a company that you would like to work for. Okay, so it's the research is fundamental for preparing for an interview. And then the second thing is practice those interview questions. Um, Go through, and this is where AI can help
Mm,
you as well to find what common interview questions are, because a lot of people are unskilled at interviews, and there are a lot of common questions that are asked. And believe me, people who are interviewing, except those who are doing it professionally, like the recruiters, they're also battling to know what to ask. So
mhm.
they will most probably go and look at AI and find common questions to ask, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's a common one.
Yeah.
Practice, practice the common um, interview questions. Then the third thing is to focus on your strengths and achievements, what you can bring to the role, and be confident about what you can bring. Be passionate about what you can bring, um, and then address the questions about the disability in the interview. Explain how you overcome the challenges that you have with that. Also, make sure that if you are in an interview for an accounting role, for example, and I keep going back to accounting
Mm.
because that's where I'm most comfortable. Know exactly what the job description is for that role and how it fits into your knowledge and experience so that you can answer questions, technical questions as they ask. Because there's nothing worse than you ask a question and and the candidate just cannot answer it at all. And I've often been on the side of an interviewer where the candidate cannot answer a single question.
Ouch.
So make sure that you know what that job description entails and do some research if you're not entirely sure how to answer those questions. Do some research about how that job fits in and have those answers readily available so that you can confidently um, understand. Take time to prepare for that interview. And then, most importantly, make sure that you are aware what the dress code is for the company. Dress code is extremely important. You don't want to arrive for an interview and you're in jeans and a t-shirt when it's a more formal environment. Rather err on the side of caution and dress up for an interview rather than dressing down for an interview. So dress is extremely important, and it can make or break your application for that role.
I was going to say that's not an easy one to kind of search on a website to find out what is the dress code of this company because it's not often easily presented. So I think that the advice that you're giving there is rather be cautious and dress more smartly than is maybe required, rather than
Yes,
erring on the side and going in your, your tracksuit pants and your tackies. So,
absolutely.
okay, got it.
And
Great.
often companies do have social media pages where, and on their company websites, they do have photos of their staff. So you would be able to see what sort of dress, if it's open neck or if it's ties and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And um, but basically, my suggestion would be smart for a lady, um, and a suit and tie for a gentleman.
okay.
Something that you would wear to a formal company. Something that looks very professional.
Because you can always dress down later,
Yes,
but you can never make a better first impression.
correct. First
Okay.
impression is key.
I think what you said there as well about bearing in mind that when you go into an interview situation, you have been called in not generally because, hey, we like this candidate, but we haven't thought about what position they might work for. We just want to bring them in and chat to them. You're being brought in to speak to your skills, your abilities, and your competency for a specific role. So it's about showing that you can do that job within the culture of the organization. But I also think that one of the important elements that you raised there was around if you do have a disability, is to show in your answers that your disability will not impact on your ability to do that job. So, yes, while there are legal requirements of what may and may not be asked of you as a person with a disability, it's still, those questions are going to be in the mind of the panel that's interviewing you. Will this person be able to do the job? So if you are able to answer their questions without them needing to go into that gray area of questions about what is possible and what is not, it is a good way of relieving any doubts that they may have. Would you agree?
Correct. And yes, absolutely. And I would just like to add, the more comfortable you are with disclosing exactly what you can do and what accommodations are necessary, the more at ease your prospective employer will be about employing you. So if you are open and upfront and honest with your prospective employer, it puts their mind at ease, because there will always be the worry about what if you are not capable of doing X, Y, and Z.
Mm. Okay. Karen, if people would like to contact you, how can they do so?
All right, great. Thanks. They can email me at Karen at isisekelo.co.za. Let me spell Isisekelo, Isekelo.co.za. And they can even phone me, my or WhatsApp me. My number is 074 153 0992. And they can contact me though either one of those ways.
Great, thank you. Do you have a website address that they can look at on your recruitment company that you're working with?
Yes. www.isisekelo, ISISEKELO.co.za. And I am on LinkedIn. Just search for me as Karen Armour. Um, and you'll be able to pick me up there. Yeah,
Great. And we'll add those into the episode descriptions as well so that people can also find them through that. So, as a
thank you.
final question, Karen, what is the best piece of advice that you can offer to a new job seeker entering the market?
All right. Just don't give up. Stay persistent. Rejection is part of the process. Unfortunately, every single one of us will get rejected in applications. I can't tell you the number of applications I've done over my professional life that have not been successful. And there are only a handful of successful applications. So keep on going. Build and use your network. People underestimate the importance of a network. There have been a few jobs that I've had over my lifetime where I have known someone's brother's uncle.
Mm.
And so your network is vitally important. The next thing is to don't stop learning and upskilling. Keep on, even if you're unemployed, keep on learning new skills that you can add to your CV. Um, the fourth, and possibly one of the most difficult ones, is to be open for entry level opportunities that build on your experience. Sometimes people will want to earn R1 million a year and they won't necessarily have the skills to be able to do that. Sometimes you have to accept a 200,000 to 300,000 a year position. So entry level positions actually can build, and depending on the company, you can grow and develop within that company. You don't have to be moving from different company to different company. So be very open about accepting something that maybe you might be overqualified for. It's just to get your foot in that door. And one of the most important things, and I suppose this goes with life, believe that you're valuable. Believe that any employer would be lucky to have you, because if you believe in your value and your strengths that you can add to the company, that will come through in your interviews and in your confidence. If you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect anybody else to
Mm.
believe in you?
Karen Armour, thank you so much for chatting to us today on a different way of seeing and sharing some of your thoughts and your insights into the recruitment space for people with disabilities and yeah, the practical advice you've given on how to best present themselves both within a recruitment engagement with a recruiter and directly with the company. We really appreciate what you've shared with us today.
Thank you very much, Lois, for having me. Always a pleasure.
Thanks so much.